الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الله أكبر ولله الحمد اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا شقيا ولا محروما اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. First, I'll apologize. I'm 5 minutes late. There's road closures around my neck of the woods, and trying to figure out how to get to university through all these twists and turns was challenging. But alhamdulillah, inshallah, I will stick to my my promise to end by maximum about 6:15 or so. I will try to finish, inshallah, what we had planned for today. Before we start, inshallah, I did have a few slides before this one. Just is this the first one? The first slide?
I think there's more in the back. Sorry, you can go back on it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Yeah.
Oh.
Wait. Use the keyboard.
So I got it. Okay. So first, just the title slide, just to make sure you guys are in the right room. This is not economics or engineering we're going to be covering. This is Tafseer of Juz Amma, inshallah, as part of the IDA. Just a show of hands, who's here for the first time today? Who wasn't here last week? Okay, so a few new folks. So I put these slides again just to quickly run over them because I anticipated some new faces, inshallah. So this is part of the IDA. If you want to know more about the IDA, which is really an academic institution that started about 3 years ago, back in Muslim Network, Wellness Network. We've been the team with under Sheikh Adnan has been running these courses for some time. Where inshallah the goal is trying to eventually get accredited as a academic institution in the religious sciences. In the meantime, we are offering these courses as credit. So if you take it as credit, inshallah, that credit will be to your name and your record, such that in the future, if this becomes inshallah something that's accredited, then at least you've gained, in addition to why we're really here, not really for the credit, we're here to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and learn His book. Because the Quran is our guide in life. It is the GPS to the right destination. And without it, we will be lost. There's no question about that. There's no way you can navigate the obstacles of life without a GPS. Because everybody will experience hardship in their life to different extents, but you will be tested to the point of your limits, and the guide to help you overcome these obstacles is the Quran. And this is obviously something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions throughout the Quran. So, but for the credit, if you want to take it as credit, the responsibilities are that show up every week, inshallah. I think regardless whether you take it as audit or credit, so somebody just wants to listen in, I think you should, inshallah, there's benefit in learning the Quran. But also if you're a credit, then you'd have to just, there's a couple assignments and a couple of assessments, inshallah. Talked about the references last week. The material will be accessible to you through the IDA portal if you sign up as a credit student. You'll have access to the recordings as well. I don't think those are available for audit, so there's also another advantage for being a credit student, inshallah. Oh, there's the slide I wanted to show. If any questions, if you're hesitant to sign up as credit or you're interested, talk to me after class, inshallah. I think we're probably extending the registration for a few more days just for people to decide, and then you can let us know. All right, so last week we started part 2 of the tafsir class. Part 1 was last year. We ran it from September to about March, which was about Ramadan time. We covered from the beginning of Juz Amma, which is the 30th Juz, and the last Juz of the Quran, Surah An-Naba, And we covered all the way to Surah Al-Balad. Actually, we did Surah Al-Shams, but the last class was really close to exams, finals, or Ramadan rather. And so we had low attendance. So I thought I'd repeat it again because it's actually a good starting point for this topic of tafsir. Has anybody studied tafsir in a formal context? Anybody taking courses of tafsir before? Has anybody sat in a halaqah of tafsir in one way, shape, or form? Okay. Yeah, I mean, there's ones running actively every Friday and Sunday at Wellness and through other masajid as well. So tafsir is really understanding the Quran, interpretation of the Quran. And what we're doing in this part 2 is covering every surah, starting from Surah Ash-Shams, which we started last week, till the end, Surah An-Nas. And why, really quickly, why are we doing Juz' Amma? We're doing Juz' Amma because it's the summary of the Quran. If you understand the summary of the Quran, you understand the main concepts that the Quran and the message of Islam came with. And that's why it's good to start there, because it's, every book has its summary at the end. The Quran is the best of books, and it does have a summary of the main concepts. Each surah in Juz' Amma, which is 37, comes with its own concept or own theme. Now these are very small pills to take. They're very concise, to the point, these surah. If you wanted more elaboration on these themes or points, you would read the rest of the Quran to understand them. Okay? But why we cover them is because you get an understanding of the comprehensive understanding of the important concepts of Islam. B, most people have at least a portion, if not all of this juz' memorized, and so they recite it in Salah, for example. And it's good to understand and reflect on what we're reciting in Salah, because that increases us in khushu' and concentration. How often do we're running late, we have to pray, I'm like, oh, we're running out of time. Throw in the Qul Huwallahu Ahad, Qul A'udhu Birabbil Falaq, or Qul A'udhu Birabbin Nas, just to get it out of the way. Right? That's not the approach we want to take. We want to make sure that when we're reading the ayat of the Quran, particularly in prayer, we're contemplating them, we're connecting with them, and that's what ultimately leads to an accepted prayer, is that khushu' and reverence that you have in the salah. So we broke down Juz' Amma based on a scholarly approach into 4 clusters. Now, there are scholars that don't break it up in this way, and there are some that do it other ways. This, I feel, in terms of the thematic approach, makes a lot of sense, because it actually clusters the surah based on major themes. We covered the first cluster and the second cluster last year. We're not going to talk about those this year. I kind of briefly glossed over them last week. We are in the third cluster. So this year, inshallah, we'll cover cluster 3 and cluster 4. Cluster 3 covers the surah that talk about the tools that are actually divinely taught. You can't learn these tools outside of Islam. If you actually were at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and talked to the Quraysh or the Arabs at the time and asked them, what does tawakkul mean? They wouldn't know. They wouldn't know what that was. If you asked them, what is taqwa? They wouldn't know. These were not concepts that were used or understood. Okay? So, yes, tawakkul wasn't there. Wakil was, though. Right? The term of wakil, to basically put your trust in someone. Right? That person is your wakil that's taking care over your wealth or your belongings as you left, for example, or traveled, or you've given them that responsibility, they became your wakil. But tawakkul as a term didn't mean much to the Arabs. And so these concepts in this cluster are divinely taught. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who taught us these, and you can't come to them just by contemplation or on your own. These are concepts, again, taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We covered a few of them last year, up to Surah Ash-Shams. So for this year, the expectation is that we'll know from whatever we just covered this year. You don't have to worry about what you missed last year if you're just joining us. Particularly for a credit student, you will not be tested on last year's material. But you may be tested on what this, the clustering of the surah means. So Surah Al-Shams, this is where we started last week and we didn't finish it quite yet. Can somebody tell us what does Surah Al-Shams talk about? What is the main theme of Surah Al-Shams?
Zakah, Tazkiyah.
Tazkiyah. What is, so Tazkiyah, Tazkiyah. If you said Tazkiyah to the Arabs at the time, they wouldn't know what that was, right? Because these are tools that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us to overcome life, the obstacles of life. And these tools are, by the way, these are, if there's anything you want to take from what Islam gives you in terms of the ability to set your mindset, essentially, these are the tools that you need to overcome the obstacles of life. So Tazkiyah, what is Tazkiyah?
It's the purification of the soul.
The purification of the nafs. Right? I try to, in English, be careful of the wording just because it confuses people. We talked about the nafs. The nafs, loosely translated in English as self. That self is two components we talked about last week. Can somebody remind us what those two components were? Yes.
The body and the soul inside.
Yeah, the soul, which is the heavenly part that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blew into the physical body with Sayyidina Adam, for example, which is, you can think about it as like a spirit, and then the physical aspect, which comes from the earth. So the earthly and the heavenly components came together to basically create the self that we all have. Now this is why it drives you to either good or bad, because you have a part of you that calls to righteousness, right? To do good, to help people, especially when you see somebody vulnerable. But also you have that component of you that drives you away and to your lowly desires, right? The earthly desires. So if you look at an animal, it's got animalistic kind of behavior. If an animal is hungry and you put its favorite meal in front of it, 10 times out of 10 it will eat it. Okay? There's no sort of discipline. This is its instinct. This is the earthly part. We have that within us, okay? And that's what we need to purify. And so we want to, again, if somebody is born without these desires that call them to wickedness, then there's probably something wrong with that person, okay? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created each person with that, with the righteousness and the wickedness within them. And so the surah starts off by Allah taking many oaths, about 11 oaths. When Allah starts a surah or a section in the Quran, for that matter, by taking an oath, there are two things we have to be mindful of. A, what the oath is taken by, because when Allah takes an oath, just like if somebody was to say Wallahi al-Azim, Wallahi al-Azim, it gets your attention. You're about to say something important, so you capture their attention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to emphasize a point for us. And so he takes an oath by his creation, subhanahu. And so what he takes the oath by is important, but also what comes after the oath is very important. And after a series of oaths, the most, by the way, in the Quran, consecutively, is in the surah. Right? The first 8 ayat. After taking an oath by his creation, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. At the end of the sequence of oaths, فَأَلْهَمَهَا وَنَفْسِ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. The last oath is by the self and what went into to making it. فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. And he gave it, subhanahu wa ta'ala, its wickedness and its righteousness. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, after these oaths, what's the important piece that we have to be mindful of? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. So successful, falah is success, that to the person who purifies it. And falah is different than najah. We talked about that last week. Najah is when you do an exam, you write it, you succeed, ana najaht. I succeeded, but success of dunya only. Falah is success of dunya and akhirah. So you actually get success in both worlds. It's not just an akhirah. A lot of people mistaken. If I do good, it just benefits me in the akhirah. Actually, no, it benefits you now too. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, inshallah. So successful are those who purify it, right? Again, the self calls to desires. And everybody's got basically essential desires or not essential, but primary desires that exist in every human. Everybody though could have them to different degrees. So, for instance, the desire to be seen or recognized, right? To be thanked when we do something, right? That exists in everybody. Now, some people have it different variations of how much of that, or the right to the desire to be not just better than anyone, but be better than anyone at any cost, right? So I want to be better, and I will do whatever it takes to get there so that I'm on top of people, right? Or to see ourselves better than others, more of the arrogance, or to not want somebody to be as good as us, especially in something that we strive for. These things exist within us, right? The desire to be famous, the desire to have a lot, the desire to have great appearance, right? And that's not to say you shouldn't have these, you shouldn't try to gain wealth and look good. But if that becomes the desire that you're after, then that is something you need to check. Because also, now you start living your life, and we'll talk about this point later when we get to the ayat, you're starting to live life to pursue that goal when that's not a goal. Okay? And it takes you away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, even knowledge. Some people want to gain knowledge so they can be recognized as experts. Why? Why do you want to be an expert? Because I want to be recognized. Well, that's not the right reason to be an expert. So everybody's got different severities of these desires. Some people understand what their weaknesses are, and some people don't. Nonetheless, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا and وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And khaba is in a state of being a loser or a loss. Man dassaha, the one who covers it up. And it's interesting, the word dassaha is used here. These feelings and thoughts that you get, what do people don't like to confront those thoughts and feelings. It causes a lot of people try to give themselves excuses to kind of numb that feeling or thought until it goes away, because they don't want to face themselves. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, dassaha, you're covering it up. It's still there, you're just putting it under the rug. So the person who doesn't address their nafs and tries to purify it will put it under the rug. Now there's also another element, the element of time. The challenge that we have is the nafs is in a state of, it's a dynamic state, it's not static. So it's not like you reach a state and you're there, you're good, okay, that's it, I'm fine, I will stay there, I'm not moving, I'm in a good spot. It doesn't happen that way. Over time, actually, you're climbing uphill. So if you're not walking up the hill, you're sliding down. There's no stopping. So if you're not actively moving your legs to move up and purify yourself, by default you're sliding. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِ فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَمَدُ فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُم. Right? Isn't it time for the believers that their hearts kind of feel reverence towards the Lord, وَمَا نَزَلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ, and what truth came to them, and they are not like the people before them who over time their hearts have hardened. And so over time, if you don't do anything, your hearts, your nafs will go down the mountain, and it will be a snowballing effect of challenges that you are going to have a hard time overcoming. So you always have to be actively purifying yourself. Okay? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. We'll continue, inshallah. Any questions so far about that first section of the surah? I will say one more thing, inshallah, actually, about the importance of, so we talked about the diseases of the self. We talked about arrogance, the the oppression of people, ujb, or to be basically self-righteous, or to want praise and be recognized by others, jealousy. We asked a bunch of questions last week, and I asked you to reflect upon them. Which of these do you find yourself experiencing? Things like, I've always wanted to do this. I've worked my entire life to pursue it, and somebody else actually that I know doesn't try and they get it. Do I feel good for them, or do I feel, negatively towards them? Those sort of things you have to actively ask yourself to see what state they're in. Okay? It's not just a matter of I pray my prayers, I fast, I'm a good Muslim, and I walk away. And that I've heard many, 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 many times. And the challenge is that you're never again in the same spot, right? You have to be actively working towards purification. Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh said that the battle with the self basically doesn't end until you die. That he described it as the sword is still dripping with blood. The sword, the fight you're having with your nafs. Umar radiallahu anh would be often seen talking to himself out loud and rebuking himself. Actually, when he was, imagine when he was now leading the prayer as a Khalifa, Salat al-Fajr, in Masjid al-Nabawi. And as he was leading the prayer, he got stabbed. Right? That's how he was killed, radiallahu anh. And he was sitting there, he was lying there bleeding, and they brought him a pillow so that he can at least put his head on it as he was bleeding on the ground. And he refused the pillow. And he said, I want to put my head on the turab, on the ground. Perhaps my Lord will look upon me with a look of mercy. Right? Because he didn't even feel safe at that point. He's the Khalifa, and he's leading Salah and Fajr, and he's Amir al-Mu'mineen. So you see how the righteous people looked upon themselves. They were never discontent with where they were. Right? Another story, and this, by the way, when you're looking at yourself, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing certain things? Now, the only thing that you should be competing with other people and feeling jealous is when? Does anyone know? Yes. You're doing good. Doing what sort of good? Right, something that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see an opportunity for khair, and that's when you become selfish, right? Not the selfish that I'm going to do it and I'm going to stop people from doing it, right? You want to allow, you want to encourage others, because by the way, when you encourage others, you get the reward as well. So even if you don't finish first, you get a nasib, or a portion of that ajr, right? So you should be selfless in everything in dunya, in anything and everything. But when it comes to Jannah and the pleasure of Allah, you should try your best to be that person that beats everyone, not at the cost of not telling people that there's khair, because you get a reward for that. However, you should pursue وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. In that shall the competitors compete. And so to get what's interesting about humans is humans will only do things that are self-serving. Anything. Even if you please Allah, you're doing it for you're self-serving, right? Because what are you expecting? You're expecting Jannah. You're expecting Allah to be pleased with you, right? You're doing it for yourself, and that's not wrong, right? But the point is that you're always doing something for self-serve. Only when it's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Jannah is that acceptable. And that is the ultimate, to get the ultimate selflessness, or the ultimate selfishness, which is Allah's pleasure in Jannah, you have to be ultimately selfless to get there. And so the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, okay, when he was mocked, or he was ridiculed, or he was attacked, he never got angry with people. He ﷺ only got angry when Allah was displeased. So if somebody was to say something to the Prophet ﷺ and attack him, he actually felt bad for them, genuinely. He would think to himself, ﷺ, what caused that person to say something like this or do something like this? and he would give them, he would look upon them a look of mercy, because it's not about him and it's not about us. So when we don't get what we want, or somebody does something that we wanted to do, life is not about us. We are just a piece, and we're not a centerpiece. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the center. Right? And so the Prophet never got angry for himself. He only got angry for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to, again, look at ourselves. Are we doing things for us, or are we doing things for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're going to vanish, and everything that we want is going to vanish. What's going to last? وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَةُ خَيْرٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ ثَوَابًا. Last story I'll mention. Abdullah bin Jabir and his father. Uhud, the battle of Uhud was coming up. And Abdullah's mother had passed away. And he had 9 sisters. And the call to participate in Uhud came. And of course somebody has to stay with the sisters. So Abdullah ibn Jabir, and so Jabir and Abdullah, the father and the son, wanted to both go, and they couldn't. And the father said to his son, he said to him, if it was for anything else, I would have let you have it, but not this one. This is for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they drew kind of lots, and the father won. So the father ended up going to Uhud, and Jabir and Abdullah had to stay. And his father was martyred in Uhud. And so actually, I'll read the hadith because it's very beautiful. Abdullah went to the Prophet and he was crying. And the Prophet, after the battle of Uhud, and the Prophet said to him, Ya Jabir, Jabir is the son, Abdullah is the father, Jabir ibn Abdullah, ibkihi aw la tabkih. فما زالت الملائكة تظلله حتى يلاقي ربه. That you can cry or not cry. But it's till now that the angels are providing shade for your father until he meets his Lord. فكلمه كفاحا, and he talked to him face to face. وما كلمه أحد غيره, and there's nobody that talked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala face to face like in this manner before. فقال يا عبد الله تمنى علي. So Allah tells his father, wish anything you want upon me. فقال يا رب أعدني إليها أقاتل في سبيلك. Oh Allah, return me, oh my Lord, return me back to earth, to dunya, so I can fight again for your sake. فقال أما هذه فلا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded and said, except for this one, no. You can't have that. You can't go back. تمنى غيرها. So ask, wish something else. فقال يا ربي بشر من بعدي بالذي لقيته. Oh Allah, give glad tidings to those after me of what I got in reward. And so the ayat that were revealed after this incident, ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Don't think those who die for the sake of Allah or killed for the sake of Allah are dead. Indeed, they are alive with Allah being provided for. And so you see here, the father wanted Jannah, wanted this opportunity that was very rare, and he did it because it's the pleasure of Allah. Had it been anything else, he would have gotten into sin because he doesn't care. And so for that, you compete. For things in dunya, you don't compete. Okay, let's continue inshallah with the ayat. The second and last section of the surah, yes?
And you mentioned in the story that they drew lots. Isn't that...
No, this is before being, it's not lots per se, it's a way to kind of decide which at the time was not disallowed. It wasn't haram, it's not. The rulings in Medina, this is the beginning of Medina Uhud, right? The rulings of that were still not, it wasn't bad. Alright, so the second section, inshallah. كذبت ثمود بطغواها
كذبت ثمود بطغواها
إذ انبعث أشقاها
إذ انبعث أشقاها
فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها
فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة ناقة الله وسقياها
فكذبوه فعقروها
فكذبوه فعقروها
فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها
فكذبوه فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها
ولا يخاف عقباها.
ولا يخاف عقباها.
So next section is كذبت ثمود بطغواها. So كذبت ثمود, the people of Thamud disbelieved or rejected بطغواها. So what does Thamud have to do with this? We're just talking about the nafs and purifying it. Thamud are people, they're actually Arabs. Okay? And the example of Ad and Thamud is mentioned throughout the Quran because it's relatable to who? Quraysh. Because Quraysh are Arab people. And examples of people before them that were Arabs also are given in the Quran to see what they did and how their fate was. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Thamud. Thamud came after Ad. Okay? And it's interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses Thamud, not Ad. Why? They're both Arabs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says they disbelieved or rejected their prophet بِطَغْوَاهَا. If you remember, if you attended last year's course, طغوا comes from طغيان or طغى. What does طغى mean? Does anyone remember from who took the class? Yes. Yeah, so طغى is to transgress. So there's two elements, the element of arrogance and oppression. When you transgress, when you oppress someone because you see yourself as superior or them as inferior or both. Okay? طغيان is to the point where you've basically crossed the red line. Okay? So when you see, and I'm sure, especially the past 2 years, we've seen actions that we would ask ourselves, how can somebody be so evil to do that? How can somebody be so evil to kill children, to starve children, right? How can you get there? Well, this is the example of Thamud. بِطَغْوَاهَا, right? They transgress so much that they reach the state of committing evil. That is, you look at it, you say, this is so bad, I can't believe people are doing it. Now, you don't reach that state overnight. That's a gradual state. You get to that state with a small, maybe mustard seed worth of racism. And what happens is you leave that and you don't clean it and purify it. And over time, it starts to grow. It starts to grow to the point where the sins and the actions are you can't describe them, you can't even fathom them, but it's because of the snowball effect. It starts small, and the snowball, as it goes down the hill, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that it grows so much that it's too big and it has so much momentum that it's hard to stop it and push it back up. And this is why it's important that we always look internally to see what's the problem with our hearts or ourselves. Do we have any arrogance? Do we have any jealousy, any envy, etc.? Always look every single day. It's a cleansing process. Because if you leave something in there for too long, it will grow. And if it grows big, listen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, we know, is open 24/7. The problem isn't that, because a lot of people always look at say, well, Allah forgive me. Yes, Allah will forgive you. The doors of repentance are open 24/7 until we die. The problem isn't that. The problem if somebody's nafs has snowballed into a ball, into a disease so big that they could care less about that mercy. The doors are still open, they're just not interested. That's the scary part. So we always look at, will Allah forgive? It's not about Allah. Allah will forgive you. It's, will you approach Allah to forgive you? Because oftentimes we get so engrossed and it just becomes something that we can't see past because we left this small problem to grow into a disaster. And this is what happened with Thamud. Thamud had Ad before them, an example before them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to them, وَاذْكُرُوا إِذْ جَعَلَكُمْ خُلَفَاءَ مِنْ بَعْدِ عَادٍ. So they knew what happened to Ad. Ad lived before them and they knew their consequences. They were also given a prophet, Sayyidina Salih. Not only that, they were experts at carving palaces and sculptures and homes in mountains with no machinery. Imagine today, right? The sophistication and the power and the wealth. And Allah sent them a sign that is even bigger than what they understood to be the most powerful. So they thought they were the most powerful when it came to mountains and carving. Allah gave them a she-camel out of an innate boulder that was sitting on the mountain. Imagine somebody that sees a she-camel come from a boulder. You think to yourself, if I saw that, I would definitely believe, right? Like, physically, a boulder that doesn't move, doesn't breathe, all of a sudden is a walking, talking, drinking she-camel. If you saw that, you would believe, right? That's what we say. But Thamud never believed, even after seeing that. Why? Because the problem of the self was too big. They couldn't even see the clearest of signs. And their example is in the surah. And what's scary about that is, we too know the stories of the people before us and what happened to them. Are we repeating the same issue, the same problem that Thamud was doing? Are we following in Thamud's footsteps? We had the Prophet, we had guidance, we had examples, many examples of even more than Thamud. Are we neglecting ourselves? Are we moving towards a path like Thamud? And I mentioned this story before, but when I first, early on in our days of marriage, my wife and I went to a restaurant. I think I mentioned this last year. And we went to the restaurant. All of a sudden, I look at her, and her face is just like a ghost, like white, and she's just in a state of shock. And then I said to her, "What's wrong?" She said, "Nothing." We sat down, and I asked her, "What's wrong? You saw something. What is it?" She said, "I just saw my old halaqa teacher, who used to be, of course, even niqabi and fully covered. She was a community leader, and she just saw her in a tight shirt and miniskirt." And these stories are real. We are never safe. Don't ever think you're ever safe and you're guided. That could be taken away any second, simply by just letting yourself be. And this is why the purification is so important. And this is what happened to Thamud. They saw all these signs and never believed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِطَغْوَاهَا إِذِ انْبَعَثَ أَشْقَاهَا, that the worst of them came forth to basically cause the corruption and kill the she-camel. فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ وَسُقِيَاهَا. The Prophet of Allah, told them, نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ, this is the she-camel of Allah. It's naqat Allah, it's not just a naqa. This is the she-camel of Allah. Like, don't hurt it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is included, you don't touch this. This is sacred. نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ وَسُقِيَاهَا, and it's got its drink, a day to drink, and you guys have a day to drink. فَكَذَّبُوهُ, they rejected him. فَعَقَرُوهَا, and they hamstrung the she-camel. Killed it in a savage way. Basically cutting off its legs until it fell, and then they killed it. فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ. So what was the consequence of that? Allah damdam. Damdam comes from dam, which means blood. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishment, a severe punishment that caused a lot of blood. بِذَنْبِهِمْ. Why? Because of all of these clear signs, all of this guidance, and they elected to reject it. Why? The nafs was too much on the nafs. It doesn't want to give up. It doesn't want to give up its desires. It doesn't want to give up its power. It doesn't want to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the scary part. By the way, Quraysh believed in Allah. They believed in Allah. But they didn't want to accept La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasul. Why? Too arrogant. Why? They let themselves. They followed the desire, what the self calls for. And that's why it has to be purified. فَدَمْدَمْ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا, and He leveled them. He leveled them. And so on the Day of Judgment, anybody who oppressed or transgressed will be leveled. Jahannam will be brought forward, and people, when they look at it, will fall to their knees. They will be leveled. And so to avoid being leveled in the Day of Judgment, we have to level ourselves here. Remind yourself, you're not all that. You're not the center of attention. You're not the center of the universe. You don't have to get what you always want. You have to go through a training process of the nafs. If you some people, when they feel too comfortable, they sleep on the floor. Just as a reminder that I can't let my nafs and my desires drag me and overcome me, and I don't have any self-discipline. So always work on yourself. Take yourself to account. حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا. وزنوها قبل أن توزنوا. Umar radiallahu anh said, take yourself into account before you are taken into account. And weigh your deeds before they're weighed for you. Because you have time to change now. But there's a time that you can't change. And that comes during the day of judgment. وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقْبَاهَا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not fear the consequences of his actions. So I kind of try to finish this section quickly so we can move on to the next surah because we're a bit behind schedule. So any questions or comments or thoughts on what the Surah Ash-Shams talks about? Yes?
If you feel like your intentions like not the right like intentions, or you notice that your intentions like leaning towards being seen or anything else, how do you like practically correct that? Like you just keep repeating the like right intentions and like reflect on them?
Yeah, so you have to discipline yourself. So it's a state of mind. You have to, how you purify, I mentioned this last week. We may be doing things a specific way because the heart desires them. The mind, though, is the consultant or advisor to the heart. It has to feed the heart the truth. And so, for example, somebody really loves wealth and holds on to wealth, right? And they're so attached to money. The brain, the mind has to teach the heart, listen, this is given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a trust. This is not really yours. And Allah is testing you to see what you're going to do with it. And if you give, you will get more. These are things that you have to, your mind tells your heart. But where does your mind get these things from in the first place? Where does it get them? Quran. And the Sunnah of the Prophet. So that's why it's extremely important because this shapes how we think. And how we think influences how we feel and behave and react. So a part of it is you're always in a state of mind where you're evaluating and contemplating. However, if yourself still does things that you shouldn't be doing, and you realize that, and again, it's not the best feeling. Your nafs doesn't like to face itself. It will not let you. You have to push. It doesn't feel comfortable. It actually feels awful, but you have to overcome that. And if yourself keeps doing these things, you have to punish it. You have to punish it. And everybody's got different punishment. So the person who doesn't like to give up wealth, every time they do something that they shouldn't be doing, they can punish themselves and say, I'm going to put $20 in the jar every single time. Or somebody who, loves their morning coffee and can't get, I have to have it, and they can't get over this desire, I'm going to fast every time I do it. You got to punish yourself in ways that are effective. But if you're like generous and I'll put the $20, well, that's not going to stop you from that because it doesn't hurt. Sorry, I had a question here first. Yes.
So I was going to say, do you think that there's like small actions or anything that it's not necessarily bad, but it's motivated by like wrong perspectives or wrong like desires? Like you mentioned the morning coffee. This is not something that seems to be.
No, not about the morning coffee. I'm saying if for example, I don't want to backbite, and then you talk behind your friend's back, and you know that you have to have your morning coffee. Punish yourself saying no morning coffee for you. I'm going to fast all day because I backbite my friend. Yeah. No, I'm not saying coffee is wrong.
Because I was like, is it like the small things could be also
Yeah, no,
inspired by desire?
yeah. So we're talking about the haram, but there's also excessive halal, which is not good, right? So when I say excessive halal, meaning there's nothing wrong with watching a basketball game on TV. But if you're spending your Sundays watching NFL football from whenever time, 12 till 9 p.m. every Sunday, you've taken something that's you're allowed to do and you've made it extensive, and that's not good, right? And so how do you control yourself, right? If coffee was wrong, I'd be in trouble. So let's not go there. But it's no, I'm talking. But by the way, it's not just about the haram; it's also in the halal, right? So if it's excessive, right? So if you feel like I didn't, I have to pray Fajr at the masjid every day, and if I miss it, I'm going to punish myself. Now, if you didn't go to Fajr, you didn't go to the masjid for Fajr, is that you've missed out on rewards? But is that haram? No, it's not haram, right? So again, this is you have to see what you want to clean, and you put measures and controls to do that. Any other questions?
I understand the mind is like the awareness of the heart for the like to do good actions, sinful actions. But if you're doing a good action, but like your intention is like not correct, or like say you want to be, for example, a doctor, and there's creating that, and like you can have a good intention, but like your nafs is leaning towards like the prestige or whatever, and like not actually for Allah.
Yeah. So
how do you correct that? Like you're doing good, but it's like
Yeah.
the intention is
Yeah, so you have to ask yourself why you're doing something. By the way, this is not just on, large scale, like, I'm dedicating my life to this career. This, even with putting like this halaqah together, right? Or going to help a friend. Ask yourself, why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? Am I expecting something in return? In one day, I'm going to ask this person for help. If you're helping them because you expect help later, or if you're taking them out for dinner because you expect them to invite you later, then your intention is wrong. Then you're not doing it for Allah. Right? So you miss out on that whole reward. But that's important to recognize. You always ask yourself, why am I doing it? Now, this is the hard part. So taqwa, which is actually the next surah, maybe it's a good segue. Taqwa is actually not difficult. Taqwa is basically translated in English as God consciousness, okay, or fearing God. That basically taqwa is the question before you do something is this displeasing to God? Is this displeasing to Allah? That's the question you ask yourself. That's not a hard question to ask. Actually, the word taqwa is supposed to be attainable by the masses. What's difficult about taqwa is consistency. Now, if you absolutely never ask yourself why am I doing what I'm doing, then you need to start. But you're not going to be asking yourself every 5 seconds that question. But over time, if you engage in that practice, you will start asking yourself every now and then, more frequently, and so on, till it gets to a point, inshallah, that everything you do, you're questioning: am I doing it for this reason, or this reason, or this reason? Okay? I'm calling to check up on my friend. Why? It's because they did me a favor last week, or is it because I want something from them, or simply I'm just checking up because that's what's pleasing to Allah, is the principle of brotherhood or sisterhood. Ask yourself, and don't accept the first answer that yourself gives, because yourself wants to give an answer to basically pat yourself on the back and say, "Yeah, I'm doing it for this reason. Why are you doing it for that reason?" And it gives a second reason. Why? Keep asking why until you really get down to the core. Because riya, right, showing off, is described actually as by the Sahaba as it's the black ant on the black rock in the middle of the dark night. Can you see it? It's very difficult to see. And so to be able to see, you have to really get down to as deep as you can in your heart and say, really, why am I doing this? And most times you'll find that, there's a reason why I'm doing it, and it's not for Allah. And the challenge is, if it's not for Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't reward it. And that's the scary part. Right? But the good news is that if you're trying your best, and Allah sees you're trying. Every time you ask yourself and you're trying your best, even if it was not necessarily the perfect intention, then ask Allah for forgiveness and ask Him to accept. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. Because you're trying. That's the point. Any other questions? Okay. We're good? Yes. Question in the back? Sorry, were you pointing to?
Sorry,
Oh, okay, sorry, I couldn't see your hand. Sorry. I'll come to you after, inshallah. Yes.
I just had a question because we usually talk about how when they deny clear signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they deny the camel and stuff like that. But when it comes to like during the times when we see the jinn and stuff like that, where he also offers quote unquote clear signs, like how are we supposed to consolidate between the two where I can't deny this one but I have to deny that one when they both seem so truthful to me?
Because you know the truth, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already told you that there's the Prophet the biggest fear the Prophet had was the Masih al-Dajjal. So we already know that this is going to happen, and the Prophet taught us what's going to happen, right? The events that are going to transpire. So again, whether you're going to be able to see it or not depends on the strength of your faith and how clean and pure yourself is. Think about it as the pair of glasses, right? The more sins, the more fog you have in front of your glasses, you can't see clearly. The more you purify, the clearer you see. So as long as you work on yourself and purify that nafs, your ability to see truth from falsehood is going to be clear. And that's how you can reconcile. Okay. I usually say, we ask about Gaza, right? And when is victory coming? And I tell my children that victory is not going to come if you miss Fajr. If you miss Fajr, forget what's happening there. If you miss Fajr, think of every sin that you commit as a step backwards for the Ummah. My sin, yes, my sin. If I do a sin, it's a step, it slows down the victory of our brothers and sisters because of what I did. Talk to yourself this way. It's mother, that's the truth. Allah will not change the state of the people until they change themselves. So if collectively the Ummah actually was fulfilling Allah's orders and commandments and staying away from His prohibitions, Gaza wouldn't be happening. Victory would come. So we have to look at ourselves, and this is what the individual contribution. There's collective contribution for sure, right? I'm not saying just focus on yourself and leave the rallies and the politics and the politicians, etc. No. That all has to. But on a personal level, you have to make sure you're purifying yourself and pleasing Allah. All right, last question before we move on.
I just wanted to ask about if you're doing something solely for yourself, is that like haram or like a sin?
So remember, we're not saying it's haram, right? This is not about haram.
Yeah.
This is about your fulfilling the self desires is what causes the nafs to stray away from the straight path until it gets far enough that it's too late to turn around. It's not too late, it's too hard to turn around. So an example of I'm doing something for myself.
Gym.
Jannah?
Like going to the gym, for example. If you think that's for yourself.
I'm going where, sorry?
To the gym.
The gym. So why are you going to the gym?
For yourself.
But
Like to become
what-
stronger, for example, or to
Okay.
look better, or to be more fit.
Okay.
And I know that's حفاظ على like your what God gave you, but I still think it is for yourself.
But this is where you have to now talk to yourself and say, first of all, I like it. Okay, I like going to the gym because I like looking good and feeling good, for sure. But that's fine and dandy. However, what you have to convince yourself is that my body that Allah gave me is a responsibility and an amana. Before what I like, I have to fulfill what He wants. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gave me an amana. I have to take care of it, right? Because there's haqq. Your body has rights over you. I have to, before you talk about the next extra bells and whistles, I have to fulfill the truth. I have to fulfill the responsibility. Allah gave me this vehicle, I have to take care of it. Your car, right? I have to take care of my car so it can run. But do I want it, do I want to put spoilers and tints and make it look good? Yeah, maybe. But the ultimate objective is, what if I don't get that? What if I just get the fact that it keeps running for me and I don't get the bells and whistles? That's all I care about. So you have to convince yourself and talk to yourself and think through what is my duty to Allah in this respect. If it gives me pleasure to look good, no, that's no problem. We're not saying that's wrong. But if you're doing it for that reason, then you're losing out on everything else. Okay? It's hard. It's not easy.
No, it sounds like the thing you're saying about the nafs giving a reason or a justification as patting yourself on the back. So what you just said makes me feel like I would be trying to convince myself that that's the reason, or maybe that really is, but it's a thin line between being aware of which is which.
So then you test yourself. What if you worked out for a full month and you never saw results? Would you be upset?
No.
Okay. So there's measures. You can put controls and measures to say, if I'm doing it to look good, and if I look horrible after a month, am I going to stop working out? If you stop working out, that means you're doing it for yourself. If you didn't, you continued irrespective of, you didn't lose weight, you didn't feel better about yourself. We know that it's good for you. Like, there's no question about that. But if it didn't give you what you were looking for and you kept doing it, that's the sign of sincerity. That's the sign of sincerity. So Islamic work happens all the time. People are working in the masjid, they love it. There's a conflict with a brother or a sister. I'm not going to the masjid anymore. Okay, well, why were you doing it then? Were you doing it for the sake of Allah? Because if you're doing it for the sake of Allah and somebody now you got upset with is causing you to move away from that, then you weren't doing it for the sake of Allah. Okay? Now, so the question to ask yourself is, if I don't, so I realize I'm not patting myself on the back. If I don't achieve what I wanted for myself, do I stop what I'm doing? Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the person who spread the rumors about his daughter Aisha radiallahu anhu, right? Hadith Katib, right? What happened with the rumors of Aisha. Abu Bakr used to give him an allowance every month. He continued to give him after this incident. Sincerity. The sincerity. He could have stopped and said, no, he spread lies about my daughter. But he wasn't doing it for that. He was doing it because he was giving somebody for the sake of Allah. Is that clear?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So we only have about 10 minutes. So I'll, inshallah, what we'll do is we'll start the surah. Surah Al-Layl is next. Surah Al-Layl talks about the concept of piety. By the way, Surah Al-Shams and Surah Al-Layl, we didn't cover that when we didn't talk about this yet. Are they Meccan or Madani surah? Yes. Mecca, right? So we talked about the importance of understanding which time, during which time of the Prophet's prophethood, surah were revealed, because the context is really important. Surah Al-Shams is a Meccan surah. By the way, you can tell based on the theme, right? And by the way, most of Juz Amma is Mecca. And Meccan surahs talk about the concept of Tawheed, oneness of Allah, accountability, Day of Judgment, stories of other people and how they, denied Allah, so they were punished, other prophets. Madani is more towards laws, and this is where the Islamic laws and the Shara became, right? So you will actually, you will not see very many ayat that are prescribing mandatory obligations in Islam when it came to Meccan period. The Meccan period is 13 years, and the Prophet made hijrah, the last 10 years in Medina. The last 10 years is when even fasting Ramadan was prescribed, right? Or the prohibition of alcohol. So these are all Madani, or Mecca, surah. Surah Al-Layl is also in the early Meccan surah. It's actually one of the first 10 surah that were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ. So its name is Surah Al-Layl, and other names that are given to it are وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى. And this surah talks about piety. The mixture of conviction and behavior that leads to a life of ease and happiness. Okay? This is the last surah of this cluster, of the third cluster of surah. Surah Al-Shams, it's interesting. Surah Al-Shams talked about tazkiyah, right? To purify your nafs. and allow it to radiate with light. And hence the name of the surah is befitting. Shams, the sun. Surah Al-Layl talks about no matter how dark life gets, because the night comes and covers, right? It's darkness. No matter how dark life becomes as the nighttime, your taqwa is what will allow you to go through it in a state of khayr. Because you have that concept, you have that element of taqwa. And hence the name Al-Layl. Okay? Yes, so inshallah ta'ala what we'll do is we'll start reading the surah, and maybe we'll just cover the first 4 ayat today, and then we'll continue on inshallah next week. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
والليل إذا يغشى.
والليل إذا يغشى.
والنهار إذا تجلى.
والنهار إذا تجلى.
وما خلق الذكر والأنثى.
وما خلق الذكر والأنثى.
إن سعيكم لشتى.
إن سعيكم لشتى.
Alright, so Surah Al-Layl is a continuation of this basic idea of Surah Al-Shams. Surah Al-Shams taught us if you want to succeed in this life and the next, you must purify yourself. This life and the next, you have to purify yourself. So that includes purifying your intention, purifying your ambitions, your thoughts, your feelings, your habits, your actions, purifying them from all sorts of diseases that we talked about, like arrogance and showing off and jealousy and so on. Surah Al-Layl is similar, but is slightly different in approach. It's got similar wording and a similar message that we'll cover inshallah ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like He did with Surah Al-Shams, He starts off Surah Al-Layl with what? With oaths, right? How many in this case? 3. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes the oath by the night, إِذَا يَغْشَى, as it covers. يَغْشَى means to cover to the point that where things are not visible. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, and by the day when it actually reveals. So things that were covered now are uncovered by the day. You see the cycle of the night and day. وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى, and by everything that went into creating male and female. Male and female. So that's basically all of creation. So between ayahs 1, 2, 3 is basically Allah's taking an oath by all His creation. Okay? So this is what Allah's taking the oath by His creation. And what comes after the oath, that's very important. Remember, after each oath, we have to heed the ayah and understand it. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. It's a beautiful ayah actually. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. So sa'i is to strive towards something, right? On the Day of Judgment, the human will actually not think about their action. They will actually think about their sa'i. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. What sa'i is what you strove for, what you dedicated your life towards. So it's different than just amal or actions. What did you dedicate? And everybody has something they dedicate their life to. Even people who are not ambitious. Their life is, when am I going to get my vacation? What am I going to do on the weekend? What am I going to hang out with my friends? And that's the first thing they wake up, they think about. Right? Everybody's got a goal, an objective. It doesn't necessarily mean it's noble. It's a goal. And some people want to do great things. Right? And this everybody has got goals. They're just, some of them are small, and some of them are big, and some of them are meaningless, and some of them are extremely useful, and everything in between. So inna sa'yakum, inna, Allah is emphasizing, indeed, your striving towards your goals, la shatta, it's diverse. La shatta, you're diverse. Different people will strive towards different things. And it's beautiful because this ayah shows that we are all diverse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in diversity. The goal is not to be the same, the carbon copy of each other. The goal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in diversity. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. You will all have different goals and different aspirations and different objectives. And so those actually should be celebrated as long as they do not go against the Shara. So cultural differences, diversity in language, in culture, in food, etc., those are to be celebrated as long as they do not overcome or they do not cross the boundaries of Islam. Islam didn't come to make everybody the same custom, the same tradition. That's not what Islam came. Islam celebrates all traditions. Only when that tradition is oppressive or transgresses the limits of Allah. So for example, there are, I'm not going to mention obviously cultures, but there are people who will have, in their culture is that, this type, these people will always eat first, and the others will not touch the food until everybody here is done, and then they can eat. Culturally, that's accepted to people. Islamically, that's wrong, because then you're creating classes, when Islam did not come to create classes when it comes to these things, right? But, this is how we, conduct our weddings. As long as, again, you're not doing anything wrong during your wedding, there's no problem. Celebrate that, okay? So, inna sa'yakum lashatta. So the surah came to teach us the concept that what you strive for, all your objectives, they're diverse. They're diverse. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. However, what's to come is what you need to be unified in. We still have to have something in common, and that's what's to come. So maybe we'll read the ayat, and I'll just quickly gloss over them, and then we'll describe them next week, inshallah. فأما من أعطى واتقى
فأما من أعطى واتقى
وصدق بالحسنى
وصدق بالحسنى
فسنيسره لليسرى.
فسنيسره لليسرى.
So there's two sides here. The first one, فأما من أعطى واتقى, to the person who أعطى, who gives, واتقى, and has taqwa. Okay? Gives what? His wealth and her wealth? Not just their wealth. Their time, their efforts, their compassion. Anything you can give that you have. فأما من أعطى واتقى, and has taqwa, which we talked already about a lot today. Right? وصدق بالحسنى, and he believes in the best. Al-Husna here, scholars have said, it's Islam. Right? And believes in the best. فسنيسره لليسرى. We will ease their way into the ultimate ease. We will ease them into the ultimate ease. And so yes, you have, and I have different goals and aspirations. It's lashatta, it's diverse, it's by design, by creation of Allah. But there's something that we all need to have in common, and that is فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. Giving, having taqwa, and believing and confirming the truth. And notice how the belief came after the first two. أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى. أَعْطَى is your relationship with other people. You can't divorce that from belief. You can't. In Islam, you can't say, oh, I believe and I'm to myself and I isolate. You can't. This is communal religion. We support each other. You have to be there for other people. You can't separate those two. And hence they're mentioned all together. Right? And that's the importance of that. So inshallah next week we will go into more details with the surah. It's about 6:15 inshallah. I'll take maybe a couple more questions if there's any. And inshallah ta'ala, I think we're going to be in the same room next week here.
I'm trying to book another room, but for now.
Okay. All right. Jazakumullah khair. Any questions before we close? Yes.
I had a question about the intentions. Maybe I'm talking about about a specific example, but let's say you are